ground herself and not listen to those voices so much. But tremendous amount of learning and things that I've been listening to her speaking, things that have taken me all these years of practicing with the Brahma Kumaris, the meditation, the spiritual study, things that I was told, my heart opened when I first came across these things, but I couldn't understand them because I come from a materialistic background, really, materialistic and scientific, writing about science. And it's taken me some 40, maybe about 38 years to understand that I really am spirit, that I really am a non-material being. But that's something that Ingrid has lived with all her life, that the material side is there, but that there's something much deeper. And as there was a lovely article a little while back by Deepak Chopra with Rudolf Tanzi, a professor of neurology. Good news, you are not your brain. Such a nice piece of news. But most of us are not privy to that information. That's funny. Finally, yes, exactly. But maybe I could. Not all of you will be familiar with Ingrid's story, so I will ask her if she could kind of summarize that. But first of all, I thought perhaps you could just say what's the take-home message, that this afternoon that you hope people will leave with. Well, you could perhaps mention that right at the start, and we can top and tail the program with that beauty, the beauty of the truth that you've come across.
Yes, and first I want to say thank you, Marcia, thank you, the Lighthouse, thank you, Brahma Kumaris, thank you, Neville, for being here, and thank you all of you, because without you, I'm not possible. And I want to start by, people ask me, what is my purpose? What is my purpose? And people always want to know what their purpose is. And then I got the precious teaching, because I asked students, okay, what is our purpose? And it was that knowing and that recognition when I got the message that says, your truly only purpose is to remember that you are the light. And your mission is to shine it in whatever you do. Because some people, when they feel the sense, oh, I am waking up or I am enlightened, they're like, no, I leave home and I go to the cave. No, the message is shine the light wherever you are, because the world needs it. So if you're a mom, be that mom with all your heart. If you're a doctor, be that doctor with your hands, with your heart, with your mind. Whatever you do, do it with that presence, with that light.
Beautiful. And can you say, before we encapsulate your story, or maybe together with your story now, the sort of the journey in a nutshell, what is that light?
That light is hard to describe in one word, but it's that presence that you are. When I had what I call the big awakening, and I was still working for NASA, and I was like, oh, that happened when I was about 40 years old. And then I was like, what can I do or say to these people? Because I felt that my heart was just swelling in like love and presence and peace and calmness and just feeling connected with everything. And then I said, what should I do or say? And the message was, do or say nothing. The light of your awareness is all they need. So be that presence. That's when you become a true giver, is the moment that when you're listening, you're present. When you're eating, you're present. When you walk, you're present. And that presence is that light. The light that we carry is what we call the light of consciousness, the light of awareness. And, you know, is to go to that place where we realize, I am that love, I am that peace, I am that openness, I am that silence. So I love the teaching that says, then the true question is, what are you doing not to be that?
Mhm.
And the path to peel those layers and go back to that presence. And what is called the light is warm, the light is connected. The light is, when you're in the light, you feel the sense of knowing, the sense of lightness, the sense of clarity. So that is that presence that is within all of us.
Mhm. You've had a varied life. You were born in Colombia, in the Andes, quite high up, and there was this episode when you were about 2.5 where you drowned. And tell us about that and what the impact of that was on you.
Oh, the impact was massive because that's what opened for me the path of connecting to the light that I am.
Mm.
And it was like, I will bring you to see how it was literally like that. And, you know, when I share my stories, I said, I'm not here to convince anybody about anything, starting from there. But I think it's important that we share the experiences because it helps each other. We're all here to show the big picture to each other. So by doing this, we're like, something similar happened to me or my mother or this or that, and we start putting the whole puzzle together. And these experiences have brought me to some deep realizations. One, that we're more connected than we think we are. Two, that we are never alone. That we never really die. That we are eternal beings. And that we are the light. And how this happened, I will try to summarize that way we can share more insights. But I was born in Colombia, and living there, I was close to 3 years old. My parents would leave us at the care of a maid, and she was a lady that didn't pay attention to us when my parents were not around. And one day my parents left, and my oldest sister and I decided, let's go play in the patio. And the patio was actually a place that we didn't supposed to be there because there was a big tank. And the purpose of this tank was to collect water for hand washing clothes, but it was a big tank. And then it held about maybe 900 liters of water. So it was big. And then we decided, let's play cash across the tank. It's where we did not supposed to be, but that was what made it fun.
Playing catching a ball.
Yes, we found a ball. I'm like, let's just play. And then my sister sat on the flat surface next to the tank, and I went on the other side, and it was like thin edge. But that was even more fun. So my sister grabbed the ball, she threw. The ball didn't apply enough force. It fell and it was floating on the water. And I leaned forward thinking, I can grab the ball. The moment I touched the ball, I lost my balance and I fell in the tank. The first feeling is that this water was frigid cold. Like you mentioned, I was born high up in the Andes. The temperature was about 4 or 5 degrees Celsius. So imagine the moment I felt the temperature of this water was like right there. That took my breath away, whatever was there. And then after that, it was the realization why I cannot breathe. I had never been in a pool. We didn't have a bathtub, so I never had been under the water. And is this why I cannot breathe? Imagine that terror. And I'm trying to get out of this tank. I don't know how to swim, and I just sank in the tank. But that's when this miracle happened. And when I am fighting for like this breath, I'm in this horror. In just a flash, I went from that state of terror to one of complete peace. Peace, calmness. Oh, it was so good. I did not know what was happening. The only thing I knew is that I don't need to breathe. I don't need to get out of the tank. I don't need to go anywhere, and this feels so good. And when people ask me, how can you remember this if you were so young? I have to bring the word contrast. What I mean with that, first, drowning is a very traumatic experience. Passing from a state of horror to one of peace, like that, how can you forget that? Then, there was other elements that were quite strong. One, this tank was entirely made of cement. It was dark. It had a roof. It was early in the morning. The last thing I saw with my eyes open was darkness, the darkness of the space. And the first thing I saw, light. So it was like a light came from below. It was like the light of a candle. So imagine the sense of like, oh, now there is light. Then the next thing, I was born in a very noisy house. There was animals, cousins, birds, sisters. And the last thing I also heard before I drowned was my heart pounding. Imagine when you're afraid and your heart is boom, 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 and it was in my head. And the moment I experienced the peace, calmness, silence, the most incredible silence, it was so peaceful that I call it the silence behind the silence. And this silence stayed with me to the point that after the experience, I would hide in closets, under the bed. If there was a chapel, I'm like, just leave me here. I wanted that silence back. And I would get mad because I cannot find it. I cannot get it. Then at that moment that I am in that silence, in that peace, in the light, I started to see bubbles. And the bubbles were surrounded by light. And it was like, oh, this is so much fun. And then I started to chase the bubbles. And it was by chasing the bubbles that I turned around and I saw a body. Mm. And at that moment, I'm like, oh, that's my body. I had that complete clarity. And the only thing that kind of shocked me about the body was that the eyes were open. And you know how the eyes are the mirror, we say the eyes are the mirror of the soul. When I saw the eyes, they were empty. So like the body was just a shell. And I'm like, oh. But then it comes the other contrast, very important one. I was born as a very sick child. And people may wonder, oh, how a child can be born sick like this. For me, there was a purpose. If I was born as a very healthy child and I have this experience, if I was healthy and doing good and this happens and the goodness continues, then I may not remember because there's no contrast. But since I went from that, like for the first 3 years of my life, I didn't even know how it was to feel well.
Really? Mm.
And now I am in complete state of well-being. So what do you think what happened the moment I saw the body? I'm like, I'm not going back there. And I turned around and I left the body behind. And when I left the body behind, I started to see flowers that were blooming from nowhere. And the sense of dimension disappeared, and I was picked by the flowers. And now I'm like, oh, and I say it's like going back to the womb, where you don't have to do anything, you're just being done. And when I am in that state of joy and relaxation and joy, in just a blink, I appear in the maid's room. And
The maid's room.
the maid's room, and I'm looking at her from above, like I'm floating.
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh, that's Maria. And Maria's listening to soap operas in the radio, completely unaware. And then the next thing, amazing thing happened is in another flash, I appear in my mom's path, floating above my mom. And this is a very important moment because one, this is what validates the experience. As a scientist, we need that validation. And second, this is, I think, what blows everybody's minds, because the moment I saw my mom and I said, oh, that's mom, she stopped. And I have to add something here important, that my mom had got a new job. What would have been the mind saying, oh, no, you have to go to your new job? No. At that very moment, my mom stopped, and she knew something was happening at home with one of her children. And my mom turned around and started to run back home. And I have to say two things about my mom. She was a very intuitive woman, but also that she listened to that intuition. So she ran. And the moment she's running, I looked at her and I said, oh, why is she running? And then at the end of the street, I see a dog. And I got distracted. And the moment I see the dog, I love animals. I'm like, oh, the desire to be with the dog, bring me to be with the dog. And I'm like, whoa. Then now I see a park, and the moment I see the park and I want to be in the park, I am in the park. And I started to play this game of going places, because it's like time and space, the way we know it, vanished. And I'm like, I'm having so much fun. And when I'm playing this game of going places, in another blink like that, I appear in a realm. And this realm was made of pure, bright, intense, shiny light. And this was the first time in my almost 3 years of life that I felt, I am home. It was the sense, I am home. And you know, home is the place where you feel welcome and embraced and comfortable and just like, oh, this is good. And then something interesting happened, and it was that although I had seen my body in the water, up to this point, I didn't have that clear realization that that was not me. At this point is when I realized, oh, I am not that. I am not that. And it's when I realized myself as a being of light. I am the light. And it's when I started to feel the sense of connection with everything. But to that point, I was still having a sense of self. But even that sense of self disappeared. And I experienced what I call nothingness. Some people call it non-self, some call it emptiness. When I said nothing, people like, what, nothing? That's kind of scary. I don't want to be in the nothing. But there's something incredible about that. And I have an analogy to make it clear. Imagine that there is a stadium. Stadium is huge. And in the middle of the stadium, there's this little tiny box. And all you thought you were was that box. And suddenly the box opens. And it's nothing, because you realize it's nothing that I thought I was. But at the same time, everything. Wholeness. the totality of everything. And it was a moment of complete interconnection, what we call oneness. And I really don't have words to express what I experienced. But the only thing I can say is a moment of pure presence. Again, that presence and pure consciousness. And it's a sense of expansion and a sense of, some call it bliss.
Bliss.
So, and when I am in this state of being, my mom finally arrived to the house. This is the other amazing thing. Well, she knew exactly where to go. The house was big, but she directed herself to the back of the house. And then there was my oldest sister trying to get me out of the tank. And then my sister looked at my mom and said, Mom, Ingrid is there and I cannot get her. My mom, look at the synchronicities of life. My mom worked with children and she had been trained to do CPR for children. So when she got me out of the tank, she said that I would like a raggedy doll. No pulse, no breathing, the nails, the lips were blue, completely pale, and my mom got me out. Whatever she knew to do, she was doing. I did not feel absolutely anything. I was completely disconnected from this body. But it was the moment when I felt I had jumped from the tallest building in the world. And there was nothing I could do to stop it. I was resisting. And it was the sense of like, no, but I was being sucked, like I was being pulled. And then I knew I was back in the body when the sense of the coldness, the sense of, imagine going back to the little box. So that sense of expansive being was now.
Especially one that's just been for some minutes drowned in this icy tank.
Yes, and that's actually what saves the body, that the water was so cold.
Right.
And then, yes, of course, now imagine the cold, and again, the body that always felt unwell. So I'm back in this body and I'm very unhappy.
Your mom would be happy.
Yes. But you know, the example I put, I said, imagine that you're a child, that you're being brought to an amusement park and you're having all the fun in the world and suddenly we have to go. No, you don't want to go. And that's how I was feeling, like, I don't want to be here.
But you came back and you were revived. And then just jumping forward a bit, I find that aspect of your mother picking up and you're being able to kind of connect with her like that, really powerful evidence in a more tangible sense about this, when you speak of this sense of oneness, of connectedness.
Yes.
And I know that I think many cultures have lost it. Some have retained it. You know, it said that the Aboriginal people in Australia have that ability. They call it dream time. They connect. And the Scots and the Celtic traditions, they called it second sight. And the emergency services know that if there's an accident at sea, for example, and they've looked for a day or two for survivors but can't find anyone, and they get a phone call from someone says, I've seen my son, he's clinging to a piece of wood. They will always take it seriously because sometimes it turns out to be that they find that person. So this kind of can happen over a distance, and it's something that completely contradictory to the materialistic view of reality, but very supportive of the understanding that there's a primary level of reality which is more informational and extended. And then you describe so beautifully how it sort of comes down into this little box. So, but then what happened after that in your childhood? And because you wanted to be a marine biologist, I remember seeing, and that you loved the sea. That was something that came about, wasn't it? There was a point where was it during your childhood that you continued to have this sense of being guided by this inner light, or at some point, I know you decided that you wanted to become more normal, more like other people were, and more grounded. So in a nutshell, what happened to the next during your rest of your childhood and early adulthood?
There's something I want to say before that, because you just mentioned it. When I asked later in my life what was the purpose of my near-death experience, was to bring the message of the power of connection.
Right. Yeah, fantastic.
Yes, that is.
Yeah, this is a deep reality, isn't it?
Yes, it's showing us how love doesn't have barriers.
Right.
I was in the spirit world, my mom was in the physical realm, and look what happened. And I got the message, you are the proof that this is real.
But love is an important ingredient, because the maid didn't hear. The maid was cut off.
Exactly.
But your mother, she intuited what was happening.
And you know what is the most important thing about that? When I asked, if the message I got is like, when you chose to leave your body behind, guess what? That was not the purpose. You were going to come back. That was the ego mind deciding not to come back. That's uncomfortable. I don't want that body. That's the ego mind.
Right.
Because the ego wants what feels good.
Yeah, the limited self.
The limited self.
Rather than this generous-hearted, extended self.
So my limited self was still at that moment running the game, and then I'm not coming back to that body.
Right.
But then I got the message, guess what? Because you were coming back, you went to look for help.
I see, yes.
And I went to look for the maid, and I went to look for my mom. But what happened with the maid? So I said, if I was looking for help, what did I stop in the maid's room? Why would I waste time? Then they say, to show you contrast.
Really?
Yes, because what you just said, what happened? What happened when there is no connection? They cannot hear you.
No, I see. Yes. So
disconnect is not possible.
There's a disconnect,
it's
right?
a disconnect.
Yeah.
What happened with your mom?
Yeah.
Complete connection, unconditional love. So they said to me, when there is no connection, they will let you drown. When there is no connection, there's division.
In a broad sense.
In a broad sense,
yes,
there's separation, there's war.
In this world
of
disconnection, we'll let each other drown unless we really reconnect with this power inside us.
Yes.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Yes. So that was a beautiful message about that experience, because that's another important thing. In all this process of deepening and understanding, I have got to realize it's not about the experience, but the purpose behind the experience.
Right.
What is it for?
So everything has a purpose.
Everything has a purpose, yes.
What about negative things? Do they have a purpose too?
Of course, because we need something that shakes us up.
I see.
I always say, we were so comfy sitting in the couch watching TV, why we would move? There would not be a reason for it, but at that moment, there's like, I'm hungry. Oh, but I don't have anything in the fridge. Oh, now I need to go to the store. Oh, but to get to the store, I need money. And to get money, I need to get a job. So it's like life moves you one way or another.
Yeah.
And then you have to go. Like, really quick, I give the analogy of a bird. Imagine a bird in a nest. Comfortable, good. And when the bird is ready, the mom said, I'm not bringing more food to this bird. He's ready. And the bird, you can take 2 paths and say, yeah, my mom is right. Or say, oh, my mom is bad. She doesn't love me. So the bird becomes a victim. And at that moment, the bird is still in the nest and say, I'm not leaving this nest. And then now the nest becomes small because the bird is growing. The bird is kind of doing all his stuff in the nest. The nest is all dirty. There's no more food, it's starving. All this discomfort because there's all this resistance. And if this bird, despite all of this, don't move out of the nest, now there's a big wind. Now there's whatever happens until the branch of this tree breaks and the bird is forced to get out of the nest. And at that moment, the bird opens the wings and flies. If it wasn't for all of these, the bird would have never known that it could fly.
Okay, so back to what happened after this, through your childhood and early adulthood. That's also extraordinarily interesting, where I remember you speaking about how you became impatient with this wider realm of knowingness. It cut you off from others in some way.
Yes.
And so you decided to be more grounded, and you pursued a quite advanced education. You became a scientist, all those sort of things. Can you just briefly give us a bit of a picture of that?
But you know, when people ask me, how could you become a marine scientist if you drown? You should be so afraid of water. I'm like, I guess it's because I didn't stay. Yeah, the trauma was something I had to work with, but I didn't stay in the trauma. I said, for me, water, drowning brought me to see the light. So for me, I just developed this really tremendous love for, one, the water, and two, the depthness of everything. So I grew up thinking the depthness, to know the depths of everything.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to know everything.
Right.
So the first thing I wanted when I was a child was a microscope.
Oh.
I wanted, and then a telescope. I wanted to see the little and the big. And when I was 4 years old, my parents brought me to see the ocean. And I told my mom, because I was born in the mountains, and I'm like, oh, Mom, someday I'm going to know what is under that blanket. Mm-hmm. And when I was 5, I told my dad, I'm going to be a marine scientist. He's like, whoa. Because we were in the mountains. He's like, that's what you want to do. That's what you will do. And then, I became very spiritual because my grandmother brought a spirituality, thanks God, in the family. Otherwise, again, it would have been just experience. And my grandmother started to bring all these clarities, and she taught me how to meditate when I was 8. And she taught me the Om. And the very night that she taught me the Om, I had my first Kundalini experience. So with my grandmother, it was this journey. But it's what you say, at 9, where other children were playing, having fun, I was like reading the Bhagavad Gita and the books of self-realization and the books of discernment. And I didn't belong completely. So at school, I was being bullied. I was being treated weirdly because I just was the child that didn't belong. And I experienced many years of not belonging, feeling like I was an alien. So, of course, when college came out, I had 3 sisters on top of that. So it came the point where the boys, the party, the dresses, and I'm like, so my sisters, Ingrid, come on, you have to put yourself together. And they had to help me with all these things. So when I went to college, I'm like, you know what? I'm tired of being the different one. I want to be normal. I want to just be normal. But you know what is beautiful? The teaching I got many years later is that clarity that, no, you didn't want to be normal. You wanted to belong. We all want to belong. So I needed to ground, and I needed to have my human experience, and I needed to belong. So that's what happened. I had to choose a career that helped me belong, because if I would have choose probably art or something elevated like that, I'd be like, oh, no, I have to really put my feet on the ground, and science did that for me. Yes.
And then how did it come about that you worked for NASA?
Oh, that was amazing. I think it just meant to happen that way. What happened is that as a marine biologist, I got to work in Colombia for different organizations, did big projects, became a really expert in El Niño phenomenon, climate change. And then once I went to the United States and got to do my PhD, what happened is I went to get a job. And then when I get to this college and I got with all my papers, I already published a couple of books, scientific books, because I did a really big project with mangrove ecosystems in the Caribbean with UNESCO, with the Environment Ministry of Colombia. I got there with all my papers, my books. And then a professor came like, are you for real? And then he said, like, let's call the next, and he started to call more professors. And when I realized I was surrounded by all this group, and they said, we don't want you to work here. We're offering you the chance to do your PhD. So I got a scholarship. I got the chance to do a PhD in oceanography. And at that moment, I'm doing the PhD, and I got to present my work at different organizations. One of those was NASA.
Oh,
And when I went to present my work at NASA, they were impressed. And then they said, why don't you apply for a scholarship with NASA? Although I already had the one with the college, but I said, of course. And then I applied to this grant, and then I got a letter saying, oh no, we're sorry, because you don't have a citizenship, you cannot get this grant. So I talked with the director of the program science. She was the Earth and Science for NASA. And I said, oh, I didn't get the scholarship because I'm not a US citizen. And he said, give me one moment. And he hung the phone. 15 minutes later, he's like, with citizenship, without citizenship, with grant, with no grant, we want you to work with NASA. So they worked it out that I got a kind of fellowship.
lovely.
And then I got to work with NASA, and it was just incredible. Yeah.
When did the point come where were you still feeling as if you were guided by the light during these years, or was it kind of more in the background during these years where you wanted to be more grounded and to belong in the more conventional way?
I think in a way, my spiritual values were always
They were still there.
Always there. But yeah, that direct connection, you know, people say, how could you cut with the being so light? And I say, how could you leave home and leave your parents behind? Same thing. I needed my independence, my individuality. So, but it's like the being so light were always one call away. Same thing as the parents. So it was not like, in a way, yeah, I caught the direct connection, but incredibly, all my career was guided by that alignment.
Right.
So I got to work with projects developing consciousness in people. So all the projects I work, how can people remember that they are nature? How can people be more conscious about the environment? So all the work I did was promoting consciousness about our planet.
Yeah, that was ahead of its time too, very much.
Yes.
So much need. So when did the feeling come that you'd lost something through this groundedness, and that you needed to reconnect, that more direct connection? Something like that happened, didn't it?
Oh, it did. And what happened, I just became very depressed. I was actually very depressed all my life. I had what is called existential depression, because when I came back I had 2 near-death experiences at that point. And it was the sense I wanted to be there. So deep inside me, I wanted to go back home.
Home being this
This
realm beyond.
Yes, and I did incredible things. I got successful in my job, everything, but there was this longing, this sense of like, and the more I separated from that sense of not being connected with my essence, the more depressed I became. So it was like, so weird, because it's like, but I'm successful in this, and I have this, and I have and the more I got in the outer world, the more depressed I become inside. So I reached this point where I was like, something is missing. And then I had the opportunity to go meet the Dalai Lama in India, and then I was receiving his teachings. And there was a moment in which I'm sitting next to him holding his hand, and my mind is thinking, what can I tell him? Oh, what can I tell him? You know, searching in the library of the mind, the 10,000 things I could tell. I could ask the Dalai Lama. And at that moment, I felt the sense, just stop and be present. But it was in that trip that I realized how disconnected I have become. And that depression went deeper. And I'm like, I have become so disconnected from the truth that I am. And I went home and I entered in such depression that I thought about committing suicide at some point. But the night I thought about that, it was the sense of just hold on. It was the sense, give yourself one more chance. And something else happened. I went into the deep prayer. And my prayer wasn't, God, change this, change that, change my life. The prayer was, God, please help me see because I cannot see. I have become blinded. Please help me see. Next day in the morning, I woke up and it was the first message that came into my mind was, go look for help, get a psychologist. It wasn't, it's again that point of connection with people. And then I went to Google immediately. I was like, oh God, I sense. I went to Google a good psychologist in my area. And when I found a name, I wrote it in a paper. And then I went to meet a friend and she's, oh, my daughter is seeing this and such psychologist. It was the same one I have written in the paper. I'm like, whoa. And that day I met another person that told me the exact same name. I'm like, okay, this is clear that this is a message, a synchronicity. I went to meet this psychologist. He was a very spiritual person. And after meeting him for a while, he said, write a list of your sufferings.
Pardon?
He told me to ask a list of my suffering.
Right. Write a list. Yeah.
And I made this at the beginning. I'm like, oh God, read the list of sufferings. But okay, let's do the list. And when I did the list and we read the list together, he said, wow, you're the first person in my 37 years of career that has suffered this much and is mentally stable. I was shaking. I'm like, I didn't think I was the one that suffered the most. I was like, what is happening? And it's when I asked him, why me? And that was the moment where the lights came on back. The moment I say, why me? And I'm like crying.
Mm-hmm.
He says, why not? And it's when he started to tell me and show me all the notes. He's like, look, thanks to this, you have done this. And thanks to this, that. And he wasn't even reading it. He's just, as when I also realized how good of a listener he was.
Right. He was tuning into you.
Yes, and how listening heals.
Right.
And then I started to type all the notes and realize that there was purpose behind everything.
Mm-hmm.
And 3 miracles happened that day. The first one was the realization, nothing ever happened to me. It happened for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
No longer a victim.
no longer.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I entered in the state of gratitude.
Yeah. The opposite of a victim.
Opposite.
Amazing.
It was a shift in perception.
Yeah.
When
Same events.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when people talk about miracles, I say true miracle is a change in perception.
Mm-hmm.
Because the moment you do, like, something that was so bad becomes what shook the bird to jump out of the nest. And like, wow, thanks to all this, I'm sitting in front of this doctor with this realization and this clarity. Second miracle. Wow, my only truth is that I'm sitting in front of this doctor and everything else is in my mind. And I can do whatever I want with what is inside me, in my head. Imagine what a powerful sense.
Mastery. Yeah.
Ah.
Just can you say a word more about that? What was it that led to that feeling of being a master rather than a victim? So that's such a sudden contrast like that.
Yes, it was just knowing that nothing, again, never happened to me. It happened for me. And it's like, thanks to this, I'm more, I could say, more compassionate, more empathic, more connected, more alive, more understanding, more evolution, more growth.
Mm.
It was like, wow. I also realized something else is like, what if I, instead of seeing what I have not been able to do, I realized what have brought me here. What were my strengths that gave me the chance to be here? Who were my allies? Now, when I think about, because I also live in a war zone for 3 years. So now instead of calling post-traumatic stress, I call it post-traumatic growth.
Mm.
Look at all I have been able, look at the tenacity we all have. Look at the strength. How, despite everything, we can be sitting here right now. Oh, we are more strong than we think we are.
You know, this is all the more wonderful. There's a realization for me, because sometimes when you hear about near-death experiences and people speak of going into this light, of a sense of expanded consciousness, and that their lives do change very
Yes,
often when they come
yes.
back. But it sometimes feels as if they've just had quite a protected existence, but the depths of suffering that you've also had, and
Yes.
then the realization where that came from, all of that is a very powerful part of your growth, as you say.
Yes. And when people tell me, oh, I want to have a near-death experience to be there, I'm like, no, you don't. There's a lot of trauma involved and a lot of work, because for a child, it takes between 30 and 40 years to integrate the experience.
Mhm.
And for an adult, between 15 and 20 years, or even more, 25, because it shifts your reality. And if you're an adult, imagine it completely cracks you. It's like, what just happened? Now, all the structure, all you thought you were, is not.
Mm.
And if you're not have the help, the preparation, or someone there that can hold your hand, you can lose your walk.
Can't handle it.
You
No.
cannot handle it. It's very hard.
Mm.
So imagine it happening when I was a child.
Mm.
So that's why I went through all this depression, because it was very hard to be here. And the only thing that finally helped with all this process of integrating and including was that awakening, was the first part, like when I realized, the other miracle that happened that day was the realization that there was nothing to forgive. I understood true forgiveness. Because if everything happens for you, so what is to forgive?
You just say thank you.
Yes. So I could say there was nothing to forgive, or everything was forgiven. But still, like, there was still more work to do on the process of finish integrating everything. And that happened with my last near-death experience.
What was that?
And that happened 2 years ago. And it happened during a surgery. And right before that surgery, I'm going to summarize to not make it too long, but there's more that happened before the surgery. But the moment of the day of that surgery, I knew something was going to happen. And I told the doctor, like, everything was worked in a way that I changed doctors. I got the doctor that was going to listen. And I told this doctor, you have to monitor my blood pressure. You have to. And then she called the anesthesiologist, because I was so adamant, and okay, we will check your blood pressure. And then during the surgery, that's supposed to be not a difficult surgery, my blood pressure dropped and I went into hypothermia. And when this happened, I'm back in the light. And then it's like, oh, and something new happened. And the other 2 times, I just came back. I was never asked, like in other experiences, oh, it's not your time, or you have to go back. The other 2 times, I was just sent back. This time, different than the others, I was asked, you want to stay or you want to go back? I was given a choice. But the moment I was asked, you want to stay? I'm like, of course I want to stay. This is heaven. That's why it's called heaven. It really feels heaven. But again, look at the component of the egoic mind wanting to be in what feels good. That's what, you know what I understood that? There's that element of temptation. Of course I want to stay. It feels good. But then I got the other sentence, or you want to go back. The moment I heard this, since now I've been practicing presence awareness for a long time, meditating, I said, wait a minute. Is this a test? I said, because if God is everything, let's call it God, source, the light of awareness, the Father, if God is everything and God is everywhere, so where is here and where is there? Say, there is not here and there is not there. Is when I had the realization, oh, there is only here and now. Everything is here and now. And at that moment, the only thing that crossed my mind was to say, keep me where I can serve God the most. And then up to that moment, I was in the state of such presence that I did not have any attachment to, I adore my son, my husband, my family, but there was no attachment. There was the sense of everything is all right. If I go back or not is indifference. It was the sense, if they have to experience this thing, that's their experience. Like, I thought everything was in perfect order and everything was all right. But the moment I said, keep me where I can serve God the most, is when that sense of my dad, my son, my husband, my sisters, my family, everything brought me back. That's an anchor. Like,
An anchor.
And I was back. But it's when I have that complete and clear realization, home is not a place, it's a state of being. And that longing to go somewhere else finally ended.
That's so interesting. So, as I'm understanding you correctly, this ended the feeling of wanting to be beyond.
Yes.
Because we're beyond anyway,
Yes.
in one sense. If there's no there or here, then it's just a matter of how we look at it.
Exactly. So it's when I got this analogy and the beings of light show me, imagine that you are in an amusement park and you wear those goggles for virtual reality. And you go up and down and you go there and here and you feel this and that. And you remove the goggles and you realize you never were anywhere. You never went anywhere. You always have been there. The source, the light is always here. You know something else I used to say? When people ask me, how could you remember your experience when you were a child if you were so little? And I said, it's like for me, the doors never close. Because I kept having all these experiences, out-of-body experiences, meeting the beings of light, all these experiences. And I said, it's like the door never closed. Years later came a teaching that said, Ingrid, of course the doors never close because there are no doors. The kingdom of heaven, the presence, God, the light of consciousness source is here for us always. We're the ones due to conditioning, to believe.
So we make the doors.
We make the doors.
Right. Yeah, there aren't, in reality, there aren't any, but they're mind constructed.
Exactly.
Like that, there's an expression, mind forged manacles, things that bind us to this realm.
Yes, all the mental construct.
Yeah.
And then, yes.
Let me just say a word about the science side on this. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but scientists have been trying for 40 or 50 years now to prove their assumption was that consciousness was a product of the brain. And they thought they would be able to prove this as they got more and more sophisticated ways of looking at the brain, what happens in it when you do certain things to it. They can scan, see which brain parts light up, which parts shut down, all of this. And in fact, one of the papers that led to that article, Good News, You're Not Your Brain, was a long paper by a scientist, I think at the University of California, forgotten his name for the moment, but it was a big paper in which he was pressing the case according to a lot of mathematics and other stuff that I didn't fully get. But he was pressing the case that we are actually living in a kind of virtual reality. And this is supported by frontiers in physics, where they say now that you don't get a particle without information to make the choice out of all the possibilities that the quantum realm operates and offers. There's information that actually brings a particle into being from the interaction of waves. And so the entire physical world is made up of these subtle vibrations, which, as you use the expression knots, they create knots which build up this huge particulate world that we get this experience in. But according to this long paper by this scientist, it really is like being in a virtual reality. And he said that when we see things like I see this table and I see this glass of water, it's really just a kind of like he drew the comparison with having your desktop of your computer or your laptop, and you drag an icon with your mouse. You drag an icon from here into the recycle bin, and you think, well, I've got rid of that. I don't want it there anymore. What you've really done is trigger some computing that has all been arranged behind the scenes. And he's saying that just like with your image of the virtual reality game, he's saying that actually the whole of this reality is in a very deep, complex way, a show put on for us in this way. Yes. We're all members of that home beyond, but we're given these different opportunities to experience this game. Yes. And people say, well, if it's all kind of illusion, what happens then? You're telling me that if I'm lying on a railway line and there's a train coming, nothing's going to happen. No, that's the rules of the game will mean that you'll be out of that body. Yeah. That's what the rules will determine, Yes. The game has rules, but ultimately the reality is that, as you say, we're consciousness and we cannot die. Such a powerful model. And it's really interesting that science is beginning to come towards understanding, because they've searched for decades to try to explain consciousness from the brain. They cannot do it.
Oh, no.
Just won't work.
Yes.
Of course, aspects of consciousness, like you take a drink or a drug, something like that, it will alter your brain function and alter your experience.
Yeah,
that's different.
It's a radio, and if you do something to the radio and change the dial in the radio or move the antenna.
Absolutely, or a television set where you alter the picture. Yes,
it's going to transmit different message.
Yes.
That's why when people talk about the world, they say the world. I said, whose world? Because we're all projecting.
Right. And we project differently, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
All builds up to an overall picture, but we get
to the
different.
point that you and I could be looking at the exact same sunset, and I could be thinking, oh, what a beautiful thing. And you could be, oh, what a dreadful day.
Yeah, exactly.
If that world was the real, then why we think differently?
Yes.
Exactly. So it's like, oh, this is more amazing.
I feel this is the future. It's incredibly important for humanity right now to awaken to this deeper level of reality and understanding. Yes. Something about the way we've been living that has, despite these experiences that people have had probably right through time, you know, the near-death experiences and things. They're studied a lot now because of advances in resuscitation and so forth.
Yes.
But so there are thousands of stories, but they're coming to the fore, and there seems to be a purpose behind all of that as well. Some sort of crisis that is impending. In your experiences and this light that has guided you for so much of your life, have you got a sense about the future that awaits us?
Yes, yes. I don't talk much about, although I have had many visions. There was a moment I asked the beings of light, how is it possible to know the future? And then the answer was amazing. They are incredible. They said, easy. Oh, really? Yes, they said, because humans and humanity are so predictable.
Predictable.
The more habitual we are, the more predictable we become. So they showing this to me as equations. Everything is numbers. And they're like, everything is like a matrix. Then they were showing to me the more habitual, like I said, we become, then guess what? That's what you're going to produce. Then is when they said to me, why do you think that you were working with numerical models? That's one of the jobs I did. Why you thought you were working with numerical models? It was not just to show you numerical models, because everything is a symbol. They say it was to show you how when things work in patterns, you can predict them. So say that a hurricane is coming, you go to your numerical model, you can predict, oh yeah, here. So imagine all of us being so habitual. So some person come to me and say, oh, can you tell me the future? I'm like, you really want to keep repeating the same thing? Why you want to know that future? That's the same thing. Create your own. How you create your own? The moment you clear your mind, the moment you become present, because we have two ways to see the time, the horizontal and the vertical. The horizontal is like a ruler. Imagine like you have it. Oh, okay. You want the same thing of the same? The moment you pause, the moment you become still, the moment you become present, you access the creative thinking of the universe.
So you step outside time in a way.
Exactly. And at that moment, you change your equation.
Mm-hmm.
At that moment, you create a new reality. So what if instead of repeating the same, we start calming the mind. We start creating that pause, that possibility to become the co-creators, co-create all together this reality. That's why this is also the time to work together. Stop being there in your own corner, doing your own thing. I always show the example of the hand. Imagine a hand, what a powerful thing when it's working together. But cut this finger. What is it going to do alone? Nothing. The moment you put all the fingers to work together, they become powerful. And this is also the example, like now that people talk about inclusion so much. Look, every finger is completely different, but they're attached to the same hand. So imagine unity and oneness. So this is the time to really start calming the mind, working together and create a new reality. Otherwise, we're going to go towards those predictions of war and destruction, and these things can happen if we keep doing the same. So it's time to become responsible, to take the baton in the hand and said, you know, the beings of light said to me, stop worrying about what others do. Not because you don't care, but because you care so much that you correct yourself first.
Such a powerful lesson.
Yes. You know that slogan that says, be the change you want to see in the world is not a slogan, it's a truth. And when we talk in terms of stillness, people say to me, but what, stillness is doing nothing? And I said, no. Stillness and movement are dancing together. Learn to dance. Learn the dance of life. Is that rhythm? And from that stillness, you access that inner wisdom. And from that inner wisdom, you know what to do, how to do it, where to be.
You're reminding me of a slogan that used to be spoken often by one of the main teachers that I had for many years in London, who was called Daddy Yankee. Daddy meant elder sister, and she was one of the founding members of the Spiritual University, a very powerful soul. And her slogan was that to to first know yourself,
Yes,
then know the Supreme,
yes,
and then you know what to do. Who am I? Who is my Father, my source?
yes.
And what do I have to do? So first knowing yourself, then connecting to the divine, and then there's that guidance, what I should now do. It's this, do you just express the same?
I love what you just said, because some people ask me, oh, I want to connect with the Supreme, I want to connect with beings, or like, I want to do this, I want it now. And like, oh, you have to first know thyself. You have to do the inner work. If you don't calm your mind, it's no way. But people want it now. And the more you want it now, the less you have it. Because again, you haven't worked yourself. So it's learning to calm the mind. You know, I love it when people want it now. I said, okay, go buy a pot and plant a seed. And tell the seed, come out now. I dare you. Tomorrow morning when I get up, you better be out. It's not happening. What you have to do is water the plant, take care of it, the pot, take care of that seed. You water, you put it in the sun. You know how much water to put little by little. And when the seed is ready, it happens.
There's one more question I'd like to ask. There was the title of the program that you did 3 years ago, I think now, via Zoom with Sister Genti, one of the Brahma Kumaris teachers in London, and Philippa, who was the interviewer, former BBC person. It was a very lovely program. It's on YouTube, by the way. You could look it up if you looked up Ingrid's name and Genti, Jayanti. It's a lovely program. I think it was actually called something like Everything is Going to Be Okay. And it was because that was a message that came through in your writings and in your speaking. You've touched on it, but you've also pointed to some dark things that can happen. And I just wanted to ask you a little word about where that conviction comes from, that everything will be okay. Partly because it resonates totally with something that I came across recently, which I loved. I learned about Mother Julian of Norwich, who was a nun back in about the 14th century, I think, hundreds of years ago. And at that time, they had a custom where someone very dedicated could live in a wall, believe it or not. They would be walled up. And she lived in a wall for 3 years. And they would just pass her food through and so forth. But for 3 years in the wall. And when she came out, the overwhelming thing that she came out with was, all will be well. All will be well. That was what she'd learned through her time in the wall. The complete acceptance of everything. Where does that complete acceptance of everything come from when there are so many horrible things also going on, and we can see them getting worse too?
Yes, you know, there was a teaching that I received too from the beings of light that it brought me to the clarity. The moment that you get involved with, let's call it the collective, you disempower yourself. And then the analogy is a castle. Imagine there's a big castle and the whole castle is a mess. The mess of what is happening that we perceive as a mess. And then you get the good idea, I'm going to fix this castle today. That's a good intention, huh? But wow, the moment you see the castle and you think you can fix it all in one day, you disempower yourself. So we have to be very careful about going into thinking about the collective.
Mhm.
The work is, and the clever way to do it is, what about I start room by room?
Mhm.
Oh no, room by room, that's too much. What about the kitchen? Oh, the kitchen is a mess. What about the table?
Oh, the sink.
What about the sink? Exactly. And did you do that and you realize, oh, wow, I did it. And you invite the neighbor, look, oh, how did you do that? So the work is you start where you can, little by little, but you have to start somewhere.
Right.
Make that decision and start seeing the result of that. And then you share it and look, come. Oh, yes, we can do it. And if I get your help, we can actually do more. And then you start little by little, little by little. And it's when you realize it's all right. It's all right because you have that capacity, you have that power in you, you have that strength, you can do it. So I had an experience one day, I went for a walk. It was a walking meditation. And your walking meditation, of course, you're supposed to go and feel the air, listen to the birds, be present. And at the end of my meditation, I didn't hear any bird, didn't feel any wind, nothing of presence. And I realized, whoa, I was in the head. What is the first thing we do? You're not good enough. Especially if you're a spiritual. Oh, you're just, Ingrid, what? You being a spiritual and you're not keeping up with it? No, this is not good. We are trained to think that we're not good enough. And at that moment, another miracle happened. It's when I had the realization, oh, I became aware that I was not aware. And instead of being mad at me, I started to praise my awareness. Say, good job, you are aware. And nowadays, every time I am aware that I got mad, that I got sad, that, oh, I am aware. And I praise that awareness.
Beautiful. So you turn every difficulty into a solution.
Exactly. And I started to call it challenging opportunity. And the way I see life is what is in the way is the way. So how can anything be wrong? I'm like, oh, this is my opportunity to become more present. I'm mad. I have fear. This is my opportunity to become more attentive, more present, more here.
It's wonderful.
Yes.
I think,
another word I use before, I always say, can I be with this? That's the accepting, the unacceptable. Can I be with this?
Right. And then all will be well.
Yes.
Yeah. And I love that idea that Mother Julian, through her 3 years in the war, was separating herself from the collective of her time, which can be so misleading.
Yeah.
Because there's such a mess. The castle is very dirty in many rooms. That's a really beautiful thing. I'm going to take that with me. I'm off to India tonight, so yeah, which is wonderful. Such a lovely chance to meet Ingrid and take great inspiration from this. And I've got a couple of weeks over there, and I think it's going to be a very powerful experience because India also has a big mess, but it's also the home of so much deep understanding and spiritual understanding. So, Ingrid, it's been fantastic. I'm going to ask Marcia to come and lead us in a meditation to close.
Yes, yes.
And thanks ever so much.
Oh, thank
It's
you
really
so
fascinating.
much, Neville. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
So just take a couple of deep breaths. And as we're breathing in, we're relaxing the body, but also digesting such a beautiful, rich, wise session. As the body becomes still and relaxed, clear of any tension, I become aware of myself, looking out through these eyes, listening through these ears. I, the inner being, that is so vibrant, is the life energy, the source of life, maintaining this physical body. My essence is so pure, so bright, vibrant, and filled with goodness. I am a peaceful being. I am a loving being, a kind being. And everything that has happened in my life has been for me. I am growing every day. I am flowering to my potential. And in this awareness of a being of light, of peace, in this stillness of this moment, as my light shines in this connected state, this light spreads out, connects with others, and the light, the supreme light, of the supreme source. This is the parent, the friend that accepts me just as I am. And therefore, I belong, and I am never alone. Om Shanti. Om is I am, and Shanti is peace. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.